Culture change, diversity and inclusion, positive psychology were all things that we discussed in this fascinating hour with expert in the field, Patricia Souza. How can positive psychology be applied, implemented in busy working dads, busy working men? What expectations currently still exist in the workplace that prevent truly inclusive workplaces for us moving forwards and for the future generations in the workforce? What clashes and collisions are appearing that organizations really need to overcome to put people at the heart and center of what they do? And how does positive psychology play out there? A fascinating chat, really interesting. Let's jump into the session, see what Patricia had to share. Hello and welcome along to the Dads in Business video podcast series. My name is Rob Taylor from Dads in Business, and every time on these episodes we speak to business leaders, motivational speakers, coaches, all around topics of leadership and helping dads and men bring the best of themselves to work and to home. And in this episode, I'm delighted that we're chatting with an expert around culture, an expert around change, well-being and positive psychology. Patricia Souza is my first attempt. a very ignorant attempt at your surname. I am sorry, but I'm delighted that you've taken time out to join us. Patricia, give us a bit of a hello, and please introduce your name better than I did.
Sure. Thank you very much, Rob, and it's very nice to be here. And thank you for the invitation. So I'm Patricia Souza, with the Brazilian accent. And thank you for the expert in so many things. I hope I can be an amateur, because then I will keep learning forever. But indeed, I just finished post-graduation in positive psychology. I work with culture, diversity and inclusion, well-being, change management, and I love those topics. Wow. And I have been having fun with those topics for at least 3 years. And before I actually pivoted my career. I was a tax advisor and still am. So after 10 years doing this, I decided to follow my purpose.
Brilliant. It's and I read your biography ahead of us chatting today, and it's part of it leapt out at me. And I think, if you don't mind, before we chat about the sort of personal side of positive psychology, sure. I noticed that part of your mission and your purpose from a corporate position was to help organizations put people at the center of their organization. And it immediately made me wonder, well, what do you see in organizations that suggest they aren't doing that? And what are the risks moving forward as the workforce is more millennial based or Gen Z based now? Mm-hmm. What risks do organizations face if they don't start to put people at the center of what they do?
Yeah, sure. Very great question, Rob. Thank you. And I can give you a very recent example. I was scrolling down my LinkedIn, I believe it was this morning, and I read a post from a CEO. I won't recall his name. And he was texting that while organizations in the US are facing the great resignation, and I dare to say not in the US, worldwide, his company is facing the lowest turnover ever. And he said, or he texted, because I put my people in the center and I don't face any resignation. So at the beginning, people used to say that I was crazy. Now I think that I was right and I treat my people with respect. So I believe, and I'm pretty sure that science and the researchers back me up, we wouldn't be facing the so-called great resignation if people would be put at first and the center what they do. Of course, there are other reasons, but COVID was a marathon and a journey for a lot of people. Companies where home office were not even thinkable, or inclusion was not expected to happen. And then suddenly people are used to start working from home and having more life-work balance. They're suddenly pushed to be back to the business, right? Pushed to be back to offices where they spend and they lose 2 hours sometimes, if I think about Brazil, at least 4 hours a day in cities like São Paulo, just to commute. Whereas they're working from home, they would have all of this time for themselves. So if the organizations don't start putting people at the center, and there is, and don't get me wrong, there is a huge wave of organizations working on that right now, because this is psychology, this is science, is showing that and proved. And it's the turnovers will face and will skyrocket, as they are already in many organizations. And I have been hearing that from clients, from colleagues, from everywhere.
Yeah, I think as we all went into an enforced, certainly in Britain, I'm not sure what your lockdown was like in Luxembourg, but I think March 25th, 2020, for about 8 weeks, we were pretty much locked down and we weren't able to do our normal routines. And I think certainly from personal experience, it was a great, I guess, check-in. It was a forced stop.
Exactly.
Because and I'm sure you as well, speak to a lot of business owners and businesses where it almost becomes normal to work 80 hours a week because that's what they get used to. They speed up. And then everyone had this enforced handbrake almost. And we were speaking to businesses that were enjoying that time. They were loving it. And then the sort of, I guess, the brakes are released. And so many of them have gone back to the old habits of just saying, well, I'm going to race to 80 hours again. And I think if we've learned nothing during that lockdown, isn't it more about balance and understanding that, I don't know, we don't need the 9 to 5 anymore, do we? A lot more work can get done in dynamic spaces of time. Is that, would you agree with that?
Absolutely, Rob. And it's very interesting what you said, this sort of void that happened during the lockdown. And I can share another story that I read on LinkedIn. If I remember correctly, it was an executive from HSBC. He had a heart attack or some very life-threatening illness that brought him to the hospital. And it was a picture from him from the hospital, because he was upset that he was going to the hospital. He would be missing meetings, he would be late, and he was already thinking why he was going to surgery, what he had to do next at work. And his post was a criticism to himself, how addicted we are to being busy, how addicted we are to this craziness and this 80 hours a week and this being productive. And the question that I always raise is, are we really being productive? Because we're not machines, we're human beings. That's what makes us different than from AI and from robots. So our performance decreases as more as we work, right? And this is science, this is medicine. Because we're not, otherwise we would be living in the industrial revolution, right? Working 15, 16 hours a day. And this has been proved wrong. That's why we have labor laws and so on and so forth. And precisely what you said, right? We had this void, and I was very convinced at the beginning that we were learning and people were slowing down, and we were seeing the world and everybody talking about the animals coming back, and I think it was the Everest that people were being able to see again. Yeah. But it seems to me that it's a month that things are just going back and people are going back to airplanes again and it's business as usual. And then we have Omicron again, slowing us down, but people are rethinking their styles, that's for sure, right? Otherwise they wouldn't be resigning anymore. They wouldn't be maybe considering other employers where they could be themselves and they could have more flexibility.
Absolutely. And I think it's great that individuals, we can sort of at that individual level assess what it is that we want from an employer. And I guess, I don't know, we're at the closing stage of publishing a small book around sales leadership and culture in organizations. And we see if these dinosaur organizations, for want of a better word, don't adapt, individuals won't want to work with them, because
of course
individuals will almost have the power to choose the organizations that they want to work with. I think I read somewhere that, is it Google that gives their staff a day off to work on extracurricular activities, for example. And
yeah, they have the creativity day.
yeah, and I think Richard Branson, or is it Simon Sinek? Maybe Richard Branson was
suggesting. Richard Branson is a CEO
of Virgin. Yeah.
Exact. No, it was not him. The first post that I mentioned, I saw another post from Richard Branson, but it was not him.
Yeah, he famously said, "Train them up so they're good enough to leave, but make it a workplace that they don't want to." And I think there's so many exciting opportunities probably for organizations to embrace. But what are they struggling with, do you think, beyond allowing people to work from home? What is it that's missing, do you think, for the next generation of workforce? What are they going to want and expect from employers, do you think?
I love this question because this is going to touch another topic that is very close to my heart, which is diversity and inclusion. And for me, it's very clear, it's inclusion. And I see situations and executives sometimes communicating things like, if you work for our company, you get a bonus of 100,000, you will get a Porsche, you will get this and you get that. And those white hats, as we call, right? So the dinosaur organizations we're talking about, I'm talking about the dinosaur style of executives, talking to a Generation Z that they don't want a Porsche. They don't want to get a bonus of 100,000. They want to save the world. They want to travel around the world. They want to know different cultures. They want more than just that. They don't want to have, as I like to say, they don't want to be the richest people in the cemetery. They want to live, right? Yeah. And this disconnection and this it's a bias at the end of the day, right? Because it's to believe that what it was true for me back for the Generation X, it's true for everyone else. And being closed-minded, or as Carol Dweck wrote, the fixed mindsets, to not understand that there are other generations coming, there are other interests, that are other requisites and packages that should be considered. People don't want a bonus or a super compensation interesting package. They want sports at work. They want well-being. They want corporate social responsibility. They want to do what my organization is doing about their waste management. And of course, the top companies are doing this. If you take the example of Amazon, then the famous leadership principles, right? They just added 2 leadership principles in August. One of them is to thrive or strive to be the best employer on earth. And they wouldn't have put that if, and their first leadership principle is customer obsession, exactly what we're saying, right? Putting people at the center, but at the end of the day, it's customer. So now their last principle is strive to be the best employer. So I believe companies are shifting from not just customer obsession, but human beings obsession. And I believe this should be the goal for any organization if they want to retain the best talents.
And do you see that, Patricia, do you see that translating into profits for the organizations as well? Because I guess that has to be their goal for shareholder value, for business success. There has to be that drive for profits, I guess.
Of course.
And do you see organizations that put people at the center like that are also benefiting with increased profits, sustained profits, and so on?
Yeah, sure. And this is this question is going to relate to positive psychology, because there are several researches taking place now of, and this was my thesis, by the way, how positive and inclusive leaders drive performance. It's science. It's a no-brainer that organizations that take care of their employees, and as you said, they care about shareholders and not stakeholders anymore, they're being more profitable, because you are having people that are happier, and this happy environment, of course, will turn into most better performance for employees. And I can take myself as an example. If I wouldn't love what I do, and when I am not motivated to do my work, I don't produce the same. When I am motivated with what I'm doing, when I am happy about a project, and Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we are unicorns here living in Alice in Wonderland and or our 8 hours of work would be amazing. Of course, there will be things that won't be interesting. But one thing is a task that is not interesting in an environment, an organization that you feel welcomed and where we feel we belong. And this is going to be, again, it's diversity and inclusion, and we talk about inclusion, equity, and belonging pretty much. Companies that work on the belongingness of their employees are way more profitable than companies that are not working their inclusiveness and they are on their inclusive leadership and positive leaders.
And do you see that trickle down to the entire workforce, or are you seeing it as a shift that's just at sort of management senior level, or is it for huge organizations like I don't know, like a McDonald's, for example, where they have thousands of foot soldiers?
Yeah.
Are you seeing it trickle down there, where the Gen Z who go and get the jobs, or in the supermarkets, how does that affect them? Top down leadership, culture change like that. How is that affecting them, where they go to work 10 till 6 every day? That's what they do. What benefits will they get from it, do you think?
The whole well-being and employee engagement of organization is not just thought for the workforce that is in front of the laptop, right? It has to be thought for A to Z. And I can give, this is a retailer, right? And retailers during COVID, they were very much impacted because their stores were not open. They had to reinvent themselves. And I believe that also these employees got more engaged because of COVID as well, because they were about to lose their jobs. They wouldn't have where to go back anymore. And many of them were in, we call it here in Luxembourg, chômage. So they were receiving support from the government because they didn't have jobs. So many companies started valuing their jobs anymore. And on the other hand, employers started value their employees more as well. But of course, every crisis leads to opportunities and changes, right? So for instance, again, using a recent example from Amazon, they're starting to do deliveries using drones. They're opening their first market. They open already, if I'm not mistaken, in the US, where it's completely automatized. So you don't have employees anymore. Yeah. So what we are seeing, and this is historical. We had, if we think about the 19th century, how many people you had at the ground floor and how many people you had dealing with computers, for example. We shifted our society immensely. And then IBM in the 80s and Apple with the computers, we shifted our workforce, right? We need more intellectual people now than we have, not that we need, but this was the natural shift of the companies and organizations. We have more people in front of computers than we have on the ground floors. And this is it's a shift that is going to follow. We are going towards AI. We're going towards technology. And it's a natural process in that we see in everywhere in the world. These jobs are going to change, but of course, the well-being and the thought process is going to follow that as well, right? So for these employees, strategies, for example, for well-being, many companies do yoga or do meditation for these employees that have to stand for so many hours. Or during COVID, we were having this at my organization. We're having virtual yoga. I know from clients that before meetings, they do start meditation sessions. So we don't have anymore that prejudice or discrimination that such practices are things for startups or for Google anymore. No, it's proven that, for example, meditation is being researched and tested in Oxford as a cure for depression, for example. So it's being used for scientific purposes. And of course, this is being used for organizations as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And just as we sort of bring it into the personal side of things, and I guess from this lens, the dad's perspective, we did some research, I think it was late 2019, good timing before just before
Pre-COVID.
the pandemic. We did some follow-up research too, but the first piece of research we did suggested that 78% of dads feel that there's less support in the workplace for them than there is mothers. Is that something that you can connect with? Is that something you see? And do you think that's something that has to change with this cultural shift you're seeing as well?
Yeah, absolutely as well. And this is one of the pillars of the diversity and inclusion umbrella, for instance, that many companies tackle as parenthood, right? And I was recently having a discussion with a leader, and we were discussing which pillars organizations are tackling, what are their strategies, because basically diversity and inclusion depends on organization's strategy, of course, and also their workforce composition. And this leader was telling me that in the organization where he used to be a CEO, they were the LGBT community. They didn't feel the need to have an employee resource group for LGBT. However, the men felt the need to have a parenthood employee resource group, because there were cases of men who were taking their parental leaves or their paternity leaves, and they were suffering or they're facing discrimination from other men as well, and also as from women. And I hear that also from other female and from other women that are in high positions, and that divide and split the tasks with their partners. And for instance, where husbands need to take the children to school, they suffer discrimination from the other mothers. So this is a fact indeed, and it has to be tackled. And we can take the Nordics, for example, as role models, right? There, a man to take a paternity leave, it's a no-brainer. It's a no discussion. But if you go to countries like Brazil or US, where this is not yet so common, and you still have a more traditional society. And here, when I put traditional, is where a woman is expected to be at home, and the man is the bread taker, right?
Yeah. I think, and I raised this point in another chat that we had, but it's I remember when my first boy arrived. He's 7.5 now, and I was still in employment then. And I remember I took my 2 weeks off, and I went back, and I always remember the first day back, it was almost like, how was your holiday? You know, you've had 2 weeks off. How was your holiday? Get back to it. We've been busy. And it's like, oh, wow. And that won't have gone away. That's so it's not surprising to me that, you know, 4/5 of dads feel that there's less support in the workforce for them, because their role, as you said, is the breadwinner. That's what they do. And I guess to get real change, that has to change.
Of course.
Because if men and dads are seen as the ones that are stopping diversity and inclusion happening, let's think about why they think that they're doing that. Yeah. Because if that's my role, and I'm told that that's my role, aren't I going to double down on that and entrench myself in that? Yeah. And suggest that's what I'm doing, and you're not coming in here, we're not getting equal because this is what I'm doing. The follow-up research that we did after COVID, this was summer, autumn last year, suggested that I think half of dads with young kids at work felt that there was a perception that having young kids was a weakness to their career.
This is sad.
Yeah, exactly. It's terrible, because you almost find yourself excusing yourself for having kids. Yeah. And it makes me weaker because I have, and therefore I have to have this mask or this pretense that they don't exist, and this is work me, and this is
there's robots, right?
Yeah, this is the one that has the banter and has the professionalism and has the the dominant male persona, and I forget about everything that's over here because that's irrelevant. And I just think it has to change, and I don't know what organizations could do that's deliberately challenging that. I don't know if it's if it's a hot enough topic, for want of a better word, to challenge men and dads in the workplace, or to change that perception. I don't know, how does that show up for you? Are these things that you see?
Yeah, pretty much. And it's a journey, right? We always know where it starts when it comes to inclusion, but it's not something that we can easily see the end. And ideally, or in the ideal world, let's put like that, we shouldn't be even talking about diversity and inclusion. It should be already in our veins, but we're still here talking about it. So it's because we still have a lot to do in this space. And we are talking basically about toxic masculinity, right? And it's the same, it goes hand to hand with sexism at the end of the day, to create these avatars or these robots or dolls, to say puppets. Men have this role in society, and here we are clearly stating genders, and there is no gender identity possible, because if you are born a male, you are supposed to be man, and you are supposed to be breadwinner, and that's your role in society. You're not supposed to cry. You are not supposed to take care of your household. You are not supposed to be vulnerable. Whereas for women, and you are born a female, then you have to be a woman. That's a fact. You cannot have another gender identity. You are supposed to give birth. There is no other possibility. You are supposed to be emotional. You are supposed to be leaving or quitting your job. So it goes hand to hand, right? And I truly believe that the change, as the more we talk about gender equality, it goes hand to hand, because that's exactly gender equality, right? Is to make possible for men to have exactly the same opportunities in this field that women have. That we're talking that women should have exactly the same opportunities at workplace that men have. And my dream, I wish to see one day that countries, and not just the Nordics, they will have paternity leave exactly equal as maternity leave. Because one of the biggest discriminations and bias that I hear from employers, and especially unconscious bias situations, right, is that the biggest difference from an employer perspective to hire a man and a woman is that men or women, is that women are going to take maternity leave and they will be 6 months off at least. And one day I was having exactly this discussion with a colleague, and I said, not if the men start taking it as well, right? There won't be any difference anymore. And men will be then free, so to put like that, and to be seen as also a parent and somebody that has also, I'm not talking about to help, but the obligation, right? He's also part of a household.
And I guess that's maybe as the Gen Z. I mean, how old does a Gen Z person be now?
They're like 20, 25.
So they are the next parents, aren't they?
Exactly.
And I guess as that, when we talked earlier about what would a new employer or employee want from their employer, it's going to start being that, isn't it? It's going to start showing up more and more in conversations where it's expected. And that's going to be a real challenge from what I want versus what my dinosaur future employer can give. It's going to be so fascinating to see how that plays out. It really is.
It goes back to generations, right? We have nowadays 4 generations working together. And it's very strange, because if we take historically, the arguments that the Generation X has now from Generation Z is the same that baby boomers had from millennials, or baby boomers had on the Generation X, that they were so difficult. They want everything so fast. So we travel throughout history, and the communication is exactly the same. So the Generation X is now saying the Generation Z wants everything immediately. Millennials are saying exactly the same about the old millennials from the Generation Z. So history, it repeats itself. But what I really like from the Zers, and I truly believe it's going to be the change, is the gender identity aspects. The fact that they are more fluid, and they see and perceive love as love itself and not as gendered and genderized, if I can say that in English, that love can happen despite and regardless of gender or your sex at birth. And this, on my perspective, is going to be the biggest change from everything, because at the moment you don't have a gender assigned to you with expectations assigned to this gender anymore. You don't have a role to fulfill to your gender. You are fluid. You are allowed to cry if you were born male. You are allowed to be strong if you were born a female, and you can play soccer if you're born a female. You don't need to want to have kids if you're born a female, and you can be a houseman if you want, if you were born male, because you don't have these male female boxes anymore. And for me, this will be the biggest revolution for their generation, and the biggest change when we think about dinosaurs organizations and autocratic leaderships, right?
Yeah, and I see. I mean, less so at the moment with the kids and the gender fluid side, but they're 7, 5, and 3, and the way they consume things is different.
Completely.
The way that they have almost like an entitlement of immediacy. I want it now. Just simple things like there's an ad on YouTube. Skip. And I'm there thinking, I'm still clinging on to my youth, and I'm thinking, well, I remember a time when I had to come home from school and watch half an hour of kids television, and that was it. Now they can watch whatever they want, and they watch people playing games, and it's just the way they consume things has just changed massively. And I just think that is speeding up incredibly. Everything. It's going to be fascinating how that plays out. But I think to bring us back to sort of the positive psychology side, some more elements of the research that we were discussing earlier, there's been a marked increase, again, in the context of dads, a marked increase since the work from home and the pandemic, in overwhelm, in anxiety, in guilt, in distraction.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful you can start to share some insight and some light around how positive psychology might help overcome that. Because, well, firstly, could you define positive psychology for us that aren't au fait with it? And I guess add a bit of color into how you think it can help overcome the overwhelm, anxiety, the guilt, the perception that we're not good enough, the goal that we always must be busy. Can it help all that?
Yeah, absolutely. So positive psychology it depends on the way you see it, but it's called positive psychology pretty recent in history. So it started in the beginnings of the 2000s and of 1990s with the researchers using this name. But if we go deep into history itself, we can go back to the 50s when organization psychology and the behavioral psychologists started their works and researches. And we can think about the Maslow pyramid, for example. He was the first, what we call the first researcher in positive psychology, and to discuss about self-esteem and well-being as an employee, right? But positive psychology got stronger in the beginnings of the 2000s when they started from the American Psychology Association. They started challenging the concept that psychology is there just to study illnesses and diseases. So why not to go back and start researching the benefits in people and how to prevent diseases? And that's where we started this real change. And we started with the researches in mindfulness, meditation, and here I'm talking about specifically science, and gratitude. There are several researches now on how being grateful increases performance and increases well-being. And this goes to your question about anxiety and depression and mental health illnesses. We have researches on forgiveness, there are several amazing researches on forgiveness. And of course, this all go linked and hand to hand with employers, right? Because then companies want to understand how this can help them and their employees at the end of the day, because we're talking about resources. How I can help my people first to stay in my organization, because we cannot forget about the cost that companies have with the turnover. And it's not about just retention, but how I can become more attractive and appealing to those talents that are there. We're just mentioning about the Great Resignation. And exactly what you mentioned, this Generation Z, they don't want to work for companies where working 12 hours a day is the goal, right? They want to live their lives. They want to enjoy their lives, and they want to be happy where they work. They're leaving is, let's put their leaving slavery behind, because the baby boomers and the Generation X working 30 hours for an organization, 12 hours, 13 hours a day was fine. It was okay. And this is fine, right? It's a process. For each person is different. And this new generation, they want to be happy. And this is where exactly positive psychology has been working along. And one of the researches that I liked the most and that caught me the most during my studies, he's called Paul Zak, and aka Dr. Love, and he has several studies on oxytocin and how oxytocin and well-being. So oxytocin here being like a neurotransmitter, like endorphin or dopamine or serotonin.
Isn't oxytocin what women have floods of when they give birth?
Precisely.
I know the name from, yeah.
That's why Dr. Love, because oxytocin is considered the love neurotransmitter. It's when we are happy, when we are, for example, he has his 8 rules how to increase your oxytocin, and he says, you want me to tell you the first 2 ones very easily? First one, hug. And I didn't mention at the beginning, I'm Brazilian, so it's one of our stereotypes that we hug people very easily. And this was for me one of the shocking moments when I came to Europe, because even at work we're going to hug, and this is not seen as unprofessional. And here I had all of the time to constrain myself and to remember that, okay, I cannot touch, I cannot hug that easily, because people see you're crazy, right? And this, for me, I have perceived that changed a lot with COVID. But going back to the oxytocin, he was saying hug. 8 seconds of hug a day, it will skyrocket your oxytocin levels. And pet animals and to cuddle people, this increase our oxytocin levels. So for example, I can give you a very tip that I took for myself when I was struggling during COVID. And the first ritual that I adopted, every morning I pet my dog. I have a dog named Polly, at least for 30 seconds. It's a ritual. And then I have my husband. He was a bit jealous. So why do you pet her? Why do you pet her and you don't cuddle me? So I included that to my rituals as well. So every morning I pet my dog and I'm going to cuddle my husband as a ritual. And whenever possible, whenever I'm feeling that I'm in a meeting that I'm getting anxious or frustrated with something and I'm feeling my emotions rise, either I'm going to stop and meditate or I'm going to immediately pet my dog. And it's like a couple of seconds. Every person has their own rituals. I have friends that they go for a walk, and this is nothing less than mindfulness, right? You go and you clear your brain and you just be in the present moment. So this is where positive psychology can help. And I'm just giving you one example. There are studies on how to increase employee engagement. There is a very good professor in the Ghent University here in Belgium. He was my professor in this positive psychology course. And his research is basically on how to increase employee engagement through positive psychology.
Interesting. I mean, you mentioned about mindfulness and meditation, and it's something that I have always struggled with. if someone says mindfulness to me, I can feel myself backing away. And I wonder if, at the risk of reverting to stereotypes and stigma, is it something that men struggle with more, do you think? The mindfulness side of things?
I don't have a statistic for that, and I don't recall because my professor in the mindfulness is Tamara. She's a researcher from Oxford, Dr. Tamara Russell, and we never mentioned or discussed statistics between men and women. But the statistics there are there. It's scientific. It's that men are killing themselves, are more the higher rates of suicide are happening amongst men. Right?
Yeah, it's like 3 times more prevalent than it is in women, isn't it?
Yeah. And of course, then hypothesis, women, and then we're going to go back to the avatars and to the boxes were put on. And here was this was another point that it was a shock for me, because in the Americas, and here I say Brazil and US, it's very common to do therapy or counseling. And whenever I would talk about that, before COVID was a taboo. Now, at least people are more accessible to discuss. But if I would say I go to therapy or I do counseling because I kept my therapist from Brazil, I would immediately say, but I'm not crazy. And for me, for example, I did some studies in Germany. It's more from a society aspect acceptable if you use drugs than if you go to a psychiatrist or a shrink. So even from a professional standpoint, and this for me it's crazy because drugs are scapegoats for people dealing with mental health issues.
They're like plasters, aren't they? And it's never resolving.
And a trigger as well. They're both, right? So alcohol as well is a depressor. Cocaine is a huge depressor. Ecstasy is a depressor. So of course you have the neurotransmitters on the moment they are increasing, but on the next day they're depressors. So because those were topics that were not mentioned before, and the toll was even higher for men, because if women were not allowed in the society to talk about it, even more men that aren't even allowed to cry, right? So of course we're going to have higher rates of suicide amongst men, because if you cannot seek help, if you cannot talk to anybody to not show vulnerability, at some point you're going to crash.
Yeah, right? Something will pop. You can only put so much pressure in that balloon, can't you, until it explodes. And I guess the Dads in Business approach you'll see on the website, we like to focus on these 4 key elements, I guess, that we think make dad. And that is work life, there's family life, there's money life, and there's self. And very often it is the self that goes first. Yeah. And then we focus down and get busy at work. So therefore we're neglecting the family, all to pursue the money side, which we assume is our role. But then we can't do anything with it because we're always at work. And it comes very out of balance. And I think I love my work. I love what I do. I rarely have a bad day. It's stressful at times, but I like that challenge and it motivates me. And I guess if positive psychology, from what you're saying, is accentuate the positives, if you like, is there a risk that if we focus on solely what we love, we are actually going to say, well, I really like work, so I am going to focus more on that? And is there a risk we neglect the other things behind us anyway? Or should it be a case of, well, I recognize I really enjoy my work, and that should give me the time to focus on the other elements as well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's a very good question, but it's exactly, it's spot on the sense that we're talking about mindfulness, right? And it's hand to hand with positive psychology. And what is mindfulness? Is a state of mind to live the present and to put boundaries and to understand when do I need to do what? And it's about intention. So for example, you can have mindfulness eating or mindfulness listening. And believe me, it's very, very difficult to do mindfulness eating, for me at least. And this idea to be more present and resilience, positive psychology is going to work a lot with resilience. So to cope as well and to reduce anxiety, with meditation as well. So positive psychology always also help to understand how to enjoy every moment. Okay, and I finished my work. I'm happy with my work, but this is now the moment for me to close. And I was able to improve that a lot when I started practicing and working with meditation and mindfulness. And believe me, you just said that you would freeze. I was a person that 2 years ago would say I would never meditate in my life because I would never stop thinking, which is a bias. And I'm super hyperactive. I cannot stand still. And this is all bias. For example, I practice mindfulness right now walking my dog. So my therapy, so to say, or my practice of mindfulness is to focus throughout my path on the smells that I feel that are different and on the sounds, because I'm super hyperactive, so I need to be all the time focusing on what I'm doing in the moment. And these are the practices I do for myself. So I focus on the different smells. Whenever my mind is going away, I remember on the breath, and I remember, oh, this is a different smell for me. So positive psychology also helped to be more productive in this sense. So I finish my work. Now it's time to enjoy my dog, or to enjoy my kids, or to enjoy my partner, and so on and so forth.
So it really it does tie into a lot of other topics around boundaries and, I guess, responsibility to ourselves as well, to manage those boundaries as well. Because in some of the sessions we've run before, we've asked, and you mentioned around the intention, we asked around what people's intention was, but then what people's attention was given to. So the sort of gap between, well, my intention is to support my family, but all my attention is over here on work. And I guess that's where the stigma or stereotype comes again. My intention is to support that, and to do that, I'm going to give that all my attention. And
you're not being mindfulness, you're being mindless.
Yeah. And I think if I guess just as we start to wrap up, Patricia, would you be able to, I don't know if I'm asking too much here, is there something for those that struggle to get started with this mindfulness, what can we do that is quick, that fits into our busy schedules, or does it need to be quick? What can we start to apply and implement moving forwards? And how do we measure success, and how do we know when it's changed? What can we look back on and say, oh, I now feel like this? So to put you on the spot, what can we do?
Well, we're talking about our brains here, right? If we think about, I want to get in a better shape. You are not going to the gym tomorrow and start working out and leave the place as, I don't know, a super model body fit person. You need time, right? It's a practice. It's a commitment. It's a commitment to self. It's a commitment to ourselves, right? We're talking about me time. And it's the same goes our brains. Mindfulness and meditation, they are brain practice. So you are working out your brain, basically. And you are not going to become mindful from today to tomorrow. And whenever somebody asks me, what should I do? Just start it. And it's a quick fix. No. Please, if there is somebody listening to us that is struggling with mental health, just seek for professional. There are studies associating meditation to cure depression, but this is being followed with doctors and practitioners, and is a study from Oxford. So just seek for help of a doctor. But of course, I use meditation, for example, to handle my anxiety. Whenever I'm feeling super anxious, I stop. I search I really like Boho mindfulness meditation, and I search from their guiding meditations. I stop 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and I do it. And it helps me to go through my day. But if you tell me I don't have 10 minutes, it doesn't need to be 10 minutes. If you do a 1 minute breathing meditation practice, there is Wim Hof. He is specialized in breathing meditation. It's very difficult, but it's 1 minute. There are videos from him on YouTube, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You can have a very good breathing practice. If this is too tough, you don't like this style, there are mantra meditation practice where you're going to sing mantras. Deepak Chopra has several of them. If you don't like those, you have visualization practices where you visualize places for people that like beaches or being amongst nature and like to visualize that. That can help a lot to calm down anxiety. And what is very important for mindfulness practices is the long term, right? You will notice, and this I'm not talking about something from my head, you will see benefits on your capacity to be calmer throughout the day, to be more resilient. For example, frustration. I lost something at work. It's going to help deal with frustration and deal with your expectations. And how to start with, find what is the best for you. Each person is different. I prefer guided meditation because, as I said, I'm super hyperactive, so it helps me to hear the voice and to follow the voice. It's what works well with me. As I said, also mindfulness practices, to walk my dog and to smell every flower on my way, or to perceive the leaves, because I like to feel things, and to visualize. So I like to see what is on my path, and then it brings my attention back, and my intention, it's recalled then. So it's just to start with it. If this is important for you, again, every person is going to be different. If you want to try a mindfulness eating, you are in the middle of a meeting and you're feeling your anxiety increases, but you have them water or tea, just drink it very slowly and work on your breathing. Maybe it's a few seconds, but it will give you, because this is neuroscience, what it happens with our emotions. There is a triggering event. It's going to trigger our amygdala, or our reptilian brain, as we call it, that is there to help us to survive, but it's going to work based on our instincts, right? So it's a life-threatening thing for our amygdala, even though it's not. But this is how our amygdala works. You're going to give your amygdala a few seconds to bring to your prefrontal cortex and think, am I going to react to this, and how I'm going to react to this? And this milliseconds is going to help you.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling down some notes here, Patricia, because it's fascinating. The takeaways you're giving us. I think what you've done there is share. If you don't like this, you can do this. If you don't like this, you can do this. If you don't like, it's basically, there's something there for everybody. And I think it has to become important to us as individuals to do it, but it's on us, isn't it? It's the responsibility is on ourselves. And if the research that we carried out around rises in guilt, overwhelm, anxiety, depression, the prevalence of male suicide, if that doesn't make it important enough, what will, right? What will? I think you mentioned some interesting resources and links. I wondered if you'd mind sharing those, so I can add that in the description and the articles that will support this video, if that's all right.
Of course.
Sort of YouTube videos that might support, will be a good starting point, because I think if this chat achieves anything, it'll be a good starting point for some people that are watching. I think that'll help a lot of people. Patricia, I'm conscious of time. We could chat for ages. I love getting into these topics. How can people connect with you or follow up with you? Where can we find you so we can ask you more?
Sure. And I was going exactly to say this. I'm always happy to have an e-coffee or a chat. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to add me through you, Rob. I am very open and available. I make myself available because, as I said, I put people at the center. And all these connections, they give me back the energy that I need to do my work, for example. Maybe you're going to say, no, I don't like meditation. You need to find what is giving you back the energy. Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, these chats, I always leave them and I feel lifted, very motivated. I think they're excellent, and I think they're important for the people watching. So Patricia, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you taking an hour of your evening out to have a natter about culture and diversity and positive psychology. We've covered a lot, and yeah, thank you very much. Lovely to chat.
Thanks to you, Rob, and That's in Business, and happy to keep chatting with everyone that wants to connect further and discuss these topics.
Brilliant. Thank you, Patricia.
Bye, everyone.